Hello and welcome. This is View from the Top. I'm Modele Sharafai, so thank you for tuning in today. Nigeria is still one of the world's biggest oil exporters and relies on crude as its main foreign exchange earner. It also attracts about $1 billion worth of investments annually. Even though there is a growing presence of indigenous players in these transactions, a greater percentage of equipment and personnel used in the industry are from abroad. The Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act 2010, also known as the Local Content Law, seeks to increase indigenous participation by prescribing a minimum threshold for the use of local services and materials, and to promote transfer of technology and skills to Nigerians in the industry. A Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board was also established and charged with the responsibility of making procedural guidelines and monitoring compliance by operators within the industry. Reports from regulators and feelers from some of the indigenous oil companies is that so far the Act has been successful in encouraging development of local content, though a lot more still has to be done in enforcement. There's this belief that the implementation of the local content law in Nigeria has been hindered by artificial barriers for indigenous companies and personnel managing and controlling the oil sector. Arco Group PLC, a leading oil and gas servicing firm, is one of the indigenous companies working with the oil majors to ensure the realization of the objectives of the local content law. And Arco's managing director, Mr. Alfred Okoigun, joins me on View from the Top today, and I'm delighted. Thank you, Mr. Okoigun, for joining me.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Here is a brief biography of Mr. Okoigun before we settle down to our conversation. Alfred Okoigun was born on September 21, 1955. He read mechanical engineering at the Petroleum Training Institute, EFORO, and did a senior management program at the International Institute for Management Development, Lausanne, Switzerland, among several other courses and programs. After a one-year industrial training with ENI in Italy in 1978, Mr. Okoigun joined the NNPC as a material management officer in the Warri Refinery and Petrochemical Company. He served in that capacity from 1978 to 1980. He established Arco Petrochemical Engineering Company Limited to provide maintenance, engineering, and consultancy services to the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The group is currently made up of 3 subsidiaries: Arco Maintenance and Engineering Limited, Arco Marine and Oilfield Services Limited, and Arco Integrity Solutions Limited. Mr. Okoigun is a fellow of the Petroleum Training Institute and a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers. Let me start by asking you, how can Nigerian companies take bigger advantage of the local content policy in the petroleum industry?
Well, I think the starting point really was the enactment of that law, of the local content law, to support Nigerian indigenous firms. If that law is adhered to and monitored carefully, we can begin to see the development of Nigerian companies. We can begin to see the growth. We can begin to see transformations, and that will bring prosperity to Nigerians. Because enacting that law, we are doing something the other nations have done many years before us. We're not the only oil-producing country. We have other oil-producing countries that are not even in OPEC. Many a time I want to use Malaysia as an example. When Malaysians invited Shell to their country to help them bring out values for their resources, that is the crude oil, which they didn't have as much as us, the Malaysian government committed shares, said, look, we're ready to open our doors to you, but we want at the end of the day, they gave them a number of years, that by that time, their locals should be in charge of the affairs of the oil and gas industry. In which case, you want to prospect oil in my country, no problem. You want to make profit, fine, you make a profit. But before you can do all of that and you don't, you would have trained up our local personnel. And the Shell agreed to that. And I remembered I was in Vienna, early 90s, when Riwanu Lukman was the Minister of Petroleum Resources. There was this conference in Vienna where you have the chief executives of major of the oil industries were present. And I remember clearly the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, Mr. Sir Philip Woss, made a presentation. And he said, and he was so happy, very enthusiastic about this presentation, that one of the good things they are able to bring out of their business in Malaysia was that when they went there, they went with everything. Personnel, know-how, all you can think about, because those things were not available in Malaysia. But as at the time he was talking to us in that conference, he was happy to announce to us that as at that day, Malaysians not only operate the oil and gas industry, but they are even exporting their know-how to other countries. And behold, some of those know-how is coming to Nigeria. So I raised up my hand at that time. I asked, I'm happy to hear this good news, but I'm aware that Nigeria to you is like Saudi Arabia to America. Nigeria was is one of your biggest areas of oil production. But how come you did that in Malaysia and you didn't do it in Nigeria? And he was silent for quite some time. He was quiet. He didn't know how to respond. But at the end of the day, immediately after the conference, on the tea break, the managing director of Shell, who was in Nigeria then, one Ron Voderberg, he came to me, tapped my back. He said, Alfred, do you think Shell is not doing enough? Do you know who should do more? I was pondering, who could have done more? Is it which? He said, your government. He said this. And in retrospect, I actually believe in him. The government maybe should have done more, because the Malaysian government insisted on what they wanted, and it was monitored. But here in Nigeria, all that was just necessary is just compromise here and there, and whether you make law or not, nobody is following. So really, if the law is properly monitored, like they have done in Malaysia, and then also in Norway, Norway is really the real experience every nation wants to even emulate. Before you give a license for prospecting the crude, they say, look, you must do this. Set up research institute here in Norway, partner with our locals, and they develop research centers. When you develop research center in that place, that means you are following up the trend. You know what you're going to do next and how you're going to develop your oil field for more profit. So you do all of that in Norway. So we're not begging you. If you don't want to do these things, we don't need to give you the license. And of course, if you really wanted the crude oil, you want to make money from there, all you just need to sign that you will do or that they are requiring you to do. And some of them sign up, and truly they have done all of those things in Norway. That today Norway has so benefited from this oil and gas that today is almost becoming a cause for us. Of course, Brazil. Those ones, they have gone much further. They started prospecting oil in Brazil since about 1930. Their own, they just insisted to use their technology by getting the multinationals to license Brazilian company to be able to produce some of the components they use in the oil prospecting. So when you look at all of this, see these countries that have adhered to this local content development and see their growth, you just wonder what has happened to us. But mind you, it's not too late. We can still do better.
So what's keeping us from doing better?
Well, what is stopping us in doing better? For example, I have been in this business for the last 36 years. And when I started, it was like the area I was a no-go area. It was meant exclusively for expatriates. But because of that message, I would say I got when I was a pioneer student at the Petroleum Training Institute. When that institute was commissioned, the then Minister of Mines and Power, they were called commissioner then, Shetima Alimogunu, he told us students, the pioneer students, said, look, young men, because there were no ladies in the school then, said, look, if you knew the effort the federal government has made to establish this institute to train up Nigerians to participate fully in the oil and gas industry, to take ownership of the oil and gas industry, you just cannot but do your best. So he told us this, and I was just about 20 years at that time. So that sunk into my brain that even when I now had just about 2 years spell at the Warri Refinery, my dream was, how can I make contribution? Because federal government have invested so much in us, sent some of us abroad, how can we contribute?
We have to take a break now. Please join us again.